Jack stared at the glowing numbers on his wrist device. 17 credits and 43 cents. That was everything he had left in the entire universe. He rubbed his tired eyes and leaned back against the cold metal wall of Kepler Station's main corridor. 8 years ago, he'd been a proud Marine, serving on distant worlds and protecting colonies from space pirates. 2 more years had passed since his discharge, and he'd been jumping from job to job, planet to planet, never finding his place in civilian life. Now he was stuck on this old trading station, floating around a dying star, with barely enough money. To buy a meal, the station wasn't exactly a tourist destination. Paint peeled off the walls, the air recyclers made weird noises, and half the lights flickered constantly. But it was cheap, and cheap was all Jack could afford right now. He'd been sleeping on a bench in the common area for 3 days, hoping something would turn up every morning. He checked the job board near the docking bay. Most of the listings wanted skills he didn't have or required travel money he couldn't spare. Today felt different, though. As he walked up to the flickering display, a new posting caught his eye. Garage space for sale, Bay 94C, 2 credits. Previous owner passed away. Sold ASes, no returns. Jack blinked and read it again. 2 credits. It was almost nothing. Even a cup of coffee cost more than that on this station. He touched the screen to get more details, but there weren't any. Just an address in the industrial section and a contact number for the station clerk. Something felt off about the whole thing. Why was a garage space selling for practically nothing? But Jack was desperate, and desperate people don't ask too many questions. At least it would give him somewhere to sleep that wasn't a public bench. He made his way through the station's maze of corridors. The industrial section was even more rundown than the rest of the place. Strange smells drifted from behind closed doors, and the hallways were dimmer here. Most of the businesses looked like they hadn't seen customers in months. Bay 94C was at the end of a particularly gloomy hallway. The blast door was thick and old, with warning signs in 3 different languages. Jack couldn't read 2 of them, but he got the general idea about keeping out. The station clerk's office was a tiny room, filled with stacks of paperwork and empty coffee cups. Behind the desk sat a thin alien with gills on his neck that made wheezing sounds when he breathed. His skin was pale blue, and his eyes looked like they belonged on a fish. "You hear about the garage?" the clerk asked, without looking up from his datapad. "Yeah," the posting said, 2 credits. The alien finally glanced at Jack, then went back to his screen. "You sure about this, human? That bay's been sealed up tight since old Zek died 3 months ago? Nobody knows what's inside? Could be anything." Jack pulled out his last 2 credits and placed them on the desk. "I'll take my chances." The clerk shrugged and took the money. "Your funeral. Here's the access code. Don't come crying to me if you don't like what you find." Jack walked back to Bay 94C, feeling the weight of the access card in his pocket. This was it. His last shot at having a roof over his head and maybe starting some kind of business. Even if the garage was full of junk, he could clean it out and use the space. He pressed the access card against the door reader. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the massive blast door groaned and started to slide open. The sound echoed through the empty hallway like thunder. What Jack saw inside made his jaw drop. The garage was huge, much bigger than he'd expected. But that wasn't what surprised him. The space was filled with machines and equipment unlike anything he'd ever seen. Devices that seemed to glow with their own inner light hummed quietly in the shadows. Tool racks held instruments that hurt his eyes to look at directly. Everything had smooth, curved lines that looked more like art than machinery. In the center of it all sat a vehicle that took Jack's breath away. It was sleek and silver, shaped like a teardrop with wings. But something was wrong with it. Wing was crumpled, and dark scorch marks covered the hull. Whatever this thing was, it had been in some kind of accident. As Jack stepped inside, lights began turning on automatically. The hum of machinery grew louder, and suddenly the air filled with glowing displays that appeared out of nowhere. Words scrolled past in languages he didn't recognize, then switched to something he could read. A work order appeared in the air right in front of him, glowing with blue light. Jack read it twice, then read it again. Sure, he was making a mistake. Repair. Request, temporal displacement drive. Estimated completion. Next Millennium. Payment, 10,000 quantum credits. Customer, information classified. The timestamp at the bottom showed a date that wouldn't happen for another 1,000 years. Jack backed away from the floating display, his heart pounding. This wasn't just some ordinary garage. This was something else entirely, something that shouldn't exist. The previous owner hadn't been fixing regular vehicles. He'd been working on something that could travel through time. But that was impossible, wasn't it? Time travel was science fiction, not reality. Yet here he was, standing in a garage full of alien technology. Looking at a repair order dated centuries in the future, the silver vehicle in the center of the space seemed to pulse with energy. If it was alive somehow, Jack could feel it watching him, waiting for something. The damaged wing twitched slightly, and he jumped back another step. What had he gotten himself into? 2 credits had seemed like a bargain, but maybe there was a reason nobody else wanted this place. Maybe the previous owner's death wasn't as natural as the clerk had suggested. Maybe some things were better left alone, but as Jack looked around at the incredible technology surrounding him, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Curiosity, wonder, the same feeling he'd had as a kid when he dreamed of exploring. The stars, whatever this place was, it was the most amazing thing he'd ever seen. The work order was still floating in the air, casting blue light across his face. 1,000 years in the future, a customer who hadn't even been born yet. A machine that could supposedly bend time itself. Jack took a deep breath and made his decision. He was already in this deep, might as well see where it led. He reached out and touched the glowing work order. The moment his finger made contact, the entire garage came alive. Every machine started humming in harmony, creating a sound like music. The lights grew brighter and new displays appeared everywhere, showing star charts and technical diagrams that made his head spin. The silver vehicle's engines flickered to life for just a moment, then went quiet again. But in that brief instant, Jack felt something change. The garage had accepted him. Whatever test he'd just passed, he was now part of something much bigger than himself. As the lights settled into a steady glow, Jack noticed something else. On a workbench near the damaged ship, someone had left a cup of coffee. It was still warm. Jack spent his first night in the garage staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Every few minutes, one of the alien machines would beep softly or flash a light, reminding him that he was surrounded by technology he couldn't understand. The warm coffee cup on the workbench had been the strangest part. Who leaves fresh coffee in a garage that's been sealed for 3 months? By morning, he'd made up his mind to explore properly. Whatever this place was, it was his now. The 2 credits he'd spent were the best investment he'd ever made. Even if he didn't understand what he'd bought, the garage responded to his presence in ways that seemed almost alive. When he walked near a workbench, lights would turn on automatically. When he needed a tool, the right one would somehow end up in his hand before he even reached for it. It was like the place was reading his mind. A large console in the corner caught his attention. Its surface was covered in symbols that shifted and changed as he watched. When he placed his hand on it, the symbols rearranged themselves into words he could read. A 3-dimensional map appeared above the console, showing the galaxy in incredible detail. But this wasn't any star chart he'd seen before. Whole sections of space were marked with colors and symbols that made no sense. Some areas pulsed with red light, others glowed green or blue. Lines connected different star systems, creating patterns that looked like highways across the universe. Jack touched one of the glowing points on the map. Information flowed across the display in streams of text. Trade routes, population centers, danger zones. But the dates were all wrong. Some showed events that had happened centuries ago. Others were dated hundreds of years in the future. That's when he found the personal logs, hidden in the console's memory. Banks were recordings left by the previous owner, the alien who'd run. This garage had been named Zek, and he'd kept detailed records of everything that happened here. Jack activated the first recording, and a holographic image appeared above the console. The alien looked tired, his blue skin pale and his large eyes filled with worry. When he spoke, his voice was deep and musical, nothing like the wheeze of the station clerk. 1,000 of operation? Zek began. The ship's owner has not returned for pickup. I begin to suspect they never will, at least not in this timeline. The temporal resonance grows stronger each day. Jack paused the recording. Timeline. What did that mean? He skipped ahead to more recent entries. Zek's condition seemed to worsen in each recording. Dark circles appeared under his eyes, and his movements became slower and more careful. Day 5847, Zek said in one of the final recordings. I understand now what this place truly is. The garage exists between moments, between possibilities. Every repair we make here affects not just one timeline, but dozens, maybe hundreds. The hologram flickered, and Zek's image became transparent for a moment, before solidifying again. The ship in the center isn't just damaged, he continued. Stuck, caught between past and future, existing in multiple timelines at once. And as long as it remains here, this garage will continue to exist outside normal time. Jack felt a chill run down his spine. He looked at the silver vehicle in the center of the garage. It seemed more mysterious now, sitting there quietly in the shadows. Was it really stuck in time somehow? The next few recordings were even stranger. Zek talked about customers who came from different time periods, sometimes all at once. He described repairing ships that wouldn't be built for centuries, and fixing damage that had been caused by events that hadn't happened yet. Day 6012, Zek said, his voice barely a whisper. I see them now. The other mechanics. The ones who came before me. The ones who will come after. We're all here, all working on the same repairs, just in different moments. Time has no meaning in this place. No, Jack's hands were shaking as he activated the final recording. Zek looked directly at him, as if he could see through the hologram and into the future. To whoever finds these recordings, Zek said, I want you to know that you have a choice. You can leave now, seal the garage, and forget this place exists. Or you can stay and become part of something bigger than yourself. But know this, once you truly accept what this place is, you'll never be able to live in normal time again. The hologram faded, leaving Jack alone with his thoughts, as if responding to his emotional state. The garage began to show him things. Tools moved on their own, floating through the air to demonstrate their purpose. Machines turned themselves on and off, displaying their functions. The silver ship's engines hummed briefly, and for a moment, Jack could swear he saw right through it to the wall behind. Then the strangest thing happened. Jack began to see other people in the garage. At first, they were just glimpses out of the corner of his eye, a figure working on the ship's damaged wing, someone organizing tools on a workbench. But when he turned to look directly, no one was there. The visions became clearer over the next few hours. Jack watched a tall woman with mechanical arms calibrate one of the alien devices. He saw a young man who looked barely out of his teens, carefully welding something on the ship's hull. Most disturbing of all, he occasionally caught sight of himself. Older and wearing clothes he didn't recognize. Working on repairs he didn't understand. The garage was showing him its history and its future. It's all existing in the same space at the same time. Jack found more evidence of the garage's strange nature as he explored. Carbon dating equipment showed that some machines were thousands of years old, while others registered as temporally unstable on his scanner. In one corner, he found a calendar that showed dates from 12 different time periods, all marked as current, but the most unsettling discovery came when he found Zek's personal workspace. The alien had been working on something when he died, and his tools were still laid out exactly as he'd left them. There was a half-finished repair on a small device, with detailed notes written in the margin. The notes were in Zek's handwriting, but they were dated 2 days in the future. Jack sat down heavily on a nearby stool, trying to process everything he'd learned. He was in a garage that existed outside normal time. The previous owner had been trapped here, unable to return to his normal life. And now Jack was here, possibly facing the same fate. But as he looked around at the incredible technology surrounding him, he realized something important. For the first time in years, he felt like he belonged somewhere. The garage had chosen him, just like it had chosen Zek and the others who'd come before. The question was, what was he going to do about it? The silver ship pulsed with energy as if it was waiting for his decision. The work order still floated in the air, glowing with that same blue light. No 10,000 quantum credits for a repair that wouldn't be completed for 1,000 years. Jack stood up and walked over to the ship. He placed his hand on its hull, and for just a moment he could feel the flow of time around him. Past, present, and future all existed in the same instant. He was home. On Jack's 7th day in the garage, something incredible happened. He was working on a strange device that looked like a crystal wrapped in metal wires when the air around him began to shimmer. The walls became transparent, and suddenly the garage was filled with people. But these weren't ordinary people. They were translucent, like ghosts, and they all seemed to be from different time periods. Jack watched in amazement as a creature that looked like a giant insect argued with being made of living crystal about something called scheduling conflicts. Near the damaged ship, a group of humans in uniforms he didn't recognize were examining the hull. Then he saw her. A woman stood beside the silver ship, running her hands along its surface like she owned it. She wore a military uniform, but not like any Jack had seen before. The fabric seemed to shift colors slightly, and the insignia on her shoulders were completely unfamiliar. What struck him most were her eyes. They looked like they had seen things that hadn't happened yet. "Early," she said, without turning around. Her voice was clear and strong, cutting through the ghostly conversations around them. "The repair order isn't supposed to be placed for another 3 days. Your time." Jack's military training kicked in automatically. Even though this was the strangest situation he'd ever encountered, he snapped to attention.
"Ma'am?"
"I'm Jack Sullivan. Former Terran Marine Corps. I think there might be some confusion here." The woman finally turned to face him, and Jack felt like she was looking right through him to his soul. "No confusion, Sergeant. You're exactly where you need to be. This garage exists because you're here to run it. But I don't understand any of this," Jack said, gesturing at the ghostly figures around them. "I just bought this place for 2 credits. I don't know anything about time travel or alien technology." The woman smiled, but it was a sad expression. "My name is Commander Vale. I'm from your future, about 60 years from now. This ship belongs to me, or rather, it will belong to me when I'm born." Jack's head was spinning. How is that even possible? "Time isn't as straightforward as people think," Vale explained. "It's more like a river with many branches. Sometimes those branches cross each other, creating places like this garage. The ship you see here was sent back from my time to prevent something terrible from happening." She walked closer to the damaged vehicle, and Jack noticed that her footsteps made no sound. "This is a temporal reconnaissance ship. It was designed to travel through time to gather information about threats to the galaxy. But during its first mission, something went wrong. The ghostly figures around them began to fade, but Vale remained solid and clear. The ship's temporal drive was damaged, trapping it in a time loop. Every time it tries to return to its proper timeline, it gets pulled back here. And that creates a ripple effect that keeps this garage stable across multiple time periods." Jack was trying to follow her explanation, but it was like trying to understand a foreign language. "So you're saying this place exists because your ship is broken?" "Not just broken," Vale corrected. "Sabotaged? Someone in my time doesn't want this." "Mission to succeed. They damaged the temporal drive to prevent the ship from completing its reconnaissance." She moved to a section of the ship's hull that looked particularly damaged. "The mission was supposed to gather information about a war that will destroy most of the galaxy. If we can't complete the reconnaissance, we can't prevent the war from starting." Jack felt a chill run down his spine. What kind of war? Vale's expression grew darker. It's the kind that would make the conflicts you fought in look like small disagreements. Entire species wiped out, whole star systems destroyed, billions of lives lost. The weight of what she was saying hit Jack like a physical blow. "And you think fixing this ship will prevent that?" "Not just fixing it," Vale said, "maintaining it. The ship needs constant repairs to stay stable in this timeline. Every mechanic who has worked in this garage has been part of the same mission, whether they knew it or not. Jack looked around at the incredible technology surrounding them. But why me? I'm just an ex-Marine with no money and no prospects. Surely there are better qualified people out there. Vale smiled again, and this time it seemed warmer. The garage doesn't choose people based on their qualifications. It chooses them based on their character. You've spent your entire adult life serving something bigger than yourself. That's exactly what this mission needs. She gestured to the various alien machines around them. Each person who has worked here has learned what they needed to know. The garage itself teaches its mechanics. Zek didn't start out knowing how to repair temporal drives either, but he learned. So did the dozen others who came before him. Dozen. Others? Jack asked. The garage has been operating for over 200 years, but not in linear time. Sometimes decades pass between mechanics, sometimes only days. Depends on when the timeline needs stabilization. Vale moved to a control panel near the ship and began pressing buttons. Holographic displays appeared, showing technical diagrams that made Jack's eyes water. The real question isn't whether you can learn to do this job. The question is whether you're willing to accept what it costs. What do you mean? Vale's expression grew serious. Working in this garage changes you. Constant exposure to temporal energy means you age differently than normal people. You exist partially outside. Regular time can visit the normal world, but you can never truly be part of it again. Jack thought about his life before finding the garage. The loneliness, the purposelessness, the constant feeling of being lost. What happens if I say no? Then you find someone else to take your place, and the cycle continues. The garage will keep existing, but it will need a new mechanic. Someone else will stumble across it, just like you did. The idea of passing this burden onto someone else didn't sit well with Jack. And if I say yes, Vale's smile returned, and you become part of the most important mission in galactic history. You help prevent a war that would destroy everything we hold dear. You'll find a purpose that extends beyond your own lifetime. Looked at the damaged ship, then at the incredible technology around him. For the first time since leaving the military, he felt like he had found something worth fighting for. How long would I have to do this? He asked. As long as it takes, Vale replied. The war we're preventing is still centuries away. The ship needs to be maintained until then, and probably beyond. It's not a job with a clear ending. Jack took a deep breath, thought about Zek's final recordings, about the choice the alien had faced. Then he thought about all the people whose lives hung in the balance, people who weren't even born yet. I need time to think about this, he said finally. Vale nodded, of course. But don't take too long. The timeline is more fragile than you might think, and every day without proper maintenance makes things worse. She began to fade, becoming translucent like the other ghostly figures had been. I'll be back in 3 days to hear your decision. Whatever you choose, Jack, know that you've already done more than most people ever will. You've seen the truth about what's at stake. As Vale disappeared completely, Jack was left alone with the silver ship and his thoughts. The garage hummed. Quietly around him, waiting for his decision, he walked over to the ship and placed his hand on its hull. For just a moment, he could feel the flow of time around him, could sense the countless possible futures branching out like roads in every direction. One of those roads led to the war Vale had described, another led to peace. The choice was his. Jack couldn't sleep that night. Vale's words kept echoing in his mind. A galactic war, billions of lives. It's the weight of preventing it all resting on his shoulders. He wandered around the garage, touching the alien machines, trying to understand what he was really being asked to do. The garage seemed to sense his confusion. As he moved through the space, different devices would activate, showing him glimpses of their purpose. A scanning device revealed the internal structure of the damaged ship. A repair tool demonstrated how to seal cracks in the hull. It was like the garage was trying to teach him, preparing him for the choice he had to make. By morning, Jack had made up his mind to learn everything he could before Vale returned. If he was going to make this decision, he needed to understand exactly what he was getting into. The learning process was unlike anything he'd experienced. The alien technology seemed to respond to his thoughts, showing him what he needed to know when he needed to know it. When he wondered how the temporal drive worked, holographic diagrams appeared in the air around him. When he tried to understand the ship's damage, detailed scans materialized above the console. But the more he learned, the more disturbing the truth became. Jack discovered that the garage wasn't just a repair shop, it was a prison. Every mechanic who had worked here had become trapped, unable to exist in normal time. The temporal energy that kept the garage stable also changed anyone who stayed too long. They became anchored to this place, this moment between moments. He found evidence of this in Zek's later recordings. The alien had tried to leave several times, but each attempt had failed. The normal world moved too fast for him. Regular time felt like being caught in a hurricane. The only place he could exist peacefully was here, in the garage, surrounded by temporal distortions. Day 6112, Zek had recorded. I attempted to visit the station market. Today, the experience was overwhelming. People moved like blurs. Conversations happened in fast forward, and I could barely understand what anyone was saying. I lasted only minutes before I had to return. Jack found similar recordings from other mechanics who had worked here over the centuries. Human woman named Taylor who had tried to return to her family, only to discover that decades had passed while she'd worked on a single repair. An alien engineer who had lost the ability to communicate with his own species because his thoughts now moved too slowly for their rapid language. Each mechanic had faced the same terrible realization, accepting the job meant giving up any hope of a normal life. But that wasn't the worst part. As Jack dug deeper into the garage's systems, he uncovered the real trap. The repairs weren't just maintaining the ship, they were maintaining the time loop itself. Every fix, every adjustment, every calibration was designed to keep the garage stable and the ship trapped. The garage needed a constant presence to function. Someone had to be here, working on the ship, keeping the temporal field stable. If the mechanic left for too long, the garage would destabilize, the ship would be lost, and the timeline would collapse. But here was the cruel irony. The ship could theoretically be fully repaired. Jack found the complete technical specifications, buried deep in the garage's database. With the right knowledge and enough time, someone could fix the temporal drive and send the ship back to its proper timeline. However, doing so would destroy the garage. Without the ship's temporal field to anchor it, this place between moments would cease to exist. And anyone who had been changed by working here would be lost as well. It was a perfect trap. Fix the ship and save the timeline, but destroy yourself in the process. Or keep the ship damaged and live forever in isolation, maintaining a prison of your own making. Jack sat in the pilot's chair of the damaged ship, staring at the technical readouts floating around him. Vale had said he had a choice, but it wasn't really a choice at all. This was a sentence. That's when he found Zek's final secret, hidden in an encrypted file. It was a recording the alien had made just days before his death. But this wasn't like his other logs. His voice was excited, hopeful. I think I've found a way, Zek said. A way to break the cycle without destroying everything.
Oh, the garage doesn't need just one mechanic.
It needs a constant presence. Yes, but that presence doesn't have to be a single person. Jack leaned forward, his heart racing. If there were two mechanics, Zek continued, they could share the burden. One could maintain the temporal field while the other lived in normal time. They could take turns switching places every few months. Or years, the garage would remain stable, but neither person would be completely trapped. The recording showed detailed calculations, energy readings, temporal measurements. It was all far beyond Jack's understanding, but the conclusion was clear. Zek had figured out how to make the job survivable. But it requires trust, Zek's voice continued. Complete trust between the two mechanics. Each one has to know that the other will return, will take their turn carrying the burden. If one person breaks that trust, the other becomes trapped forever. Understood now why Zek had died before implementing his plan. The alien had been alone, with no one to trust, no one to share the responsibility with. He He'd taken the secret to his grave rather than risk trapping someone else. But Jack wouldn't be alone. Somewhere out there was another person like him, desperate, lost, looking for purpose. Someone who would stumble across the garage just as he had. The question was, could he trust them with his life? Vale appeared again on the third day, just as she'd promised. But this time, Jack was ready for her. "Know about the trap," he said, before she could speak. "I know that working here means giving up everything else. I know about the other mechanics who tried to leave and couldn't." Vale's expression didn't change. "And I also know about Zek's solution. 2 mechanics, sharing the burden. It could work." For the first time since he'd met her, Vale looked surprised. "You found his research? Hidden in the ship's computer?" "He figured out how to break the cycle, but he never got a chance to try it." Vale moved to the ship's console and began pulling up displays. Zek was brilliant, but his calculations were theoretical. "There's no guarantee it would actually work. But there's a chance," Jack insisted. "A chance that 2 people could do this job without losing their entire lives to it." Vale studied the data for a long moment. "Even if it works, you'd still be risking everything. Something goes wrong, if your partner doesn't return, you'd be trapped here forever, alone." Jack thought about his life before the garage. The endless search for purpose, the loneliness, the feeling of being lost in a universe that didn't need him. "I'm already alone," he said. "At least this way, I'd be alone for a reason." Vale smiled, and for the first time it looked genuinely happy. "You understand what you're agreeing to? I understand that billions of people are counting on someone to maintain this ship, even if they don't know it. I understand that if I walk away, someone else will have to make this choice. I understand that maybe, just maybe, I can find a way to do this job without destroying whoever comes after me." Jack walked over to the ship and placed both hands on its hull. The temporal energy flowed through him, showing him glimpses of possible futures. In some, he saw the war Vale had described, entire worlds burning, species extinct, the galaxy dark and silent. In others, he saw peace, prosperity, countless lives lived in safety. "I accept the job," he said, "but I'm going to do it my way." The garage hummed with approval, and Jack felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He was now the guardian of time itself, but he wouldn't be the last. Jack made his final decision on a Tuesday that existed in 17 different centuries at the same time. Standing in the center of the garage, surrounded by impossible technology and the weight of galactic history, he sent a message to Vale through the temporal communication array. "Repair order accepted. Timeline stabilization in progress. Mechanic Jack Sullivan, proprietor of Bay 94C. Estimated completion, as long as it takes. But I'm doing this differently than the others." The garage responded to his acceptance by revealing secrets that had been hidden even from Zek. Hidden panels opened in the walls, revealing additional equipment and storage areas. The ship's computer unlocked new databases filled with technical manuals and repair guides. Most importantly, the temporal field around Jack began to change, adapting his body to exist across multiple time streams without losing his humanity. The learning process was intense, but manageable. Like the previous mechanics who had been thrown into the deep end, Jack took his time understanding each system. The garage seemed to approve of his methodical approach, providing exactly the information he needed when he was ready for it. Within weeks, Jack was performing repairs that would have seemed impossible when he first arrived. He fixed a quantum resonance chamber that had been broken for 3 centuries. He recalibrated temporal sensors that detected problems across multiple timelines. He even managed to partially repair the ship's damaged wing, though the main temporal drive remained untouchable. But Jack never forgot Zek's solution. He spent every spare moment refining the aliens' calculations, running simulations, and preparing for the day when he could put the plan into action. The garage would need 2 mechanics, and eventually someone would come looking for what he had found. Months passed, or perhaps years. Time moved strangely in the garage, and Jack found himself aging slowly, sustained by the temporal field that kept him anchored across multiple timelines. He became a legend among space travelers, though few knew his real name. stories spread of a mysterious mechanic who could fix anything, who always seemed to know exactly what repairs were needed. Customers came from across the galaxy and across time. A trader from the 25th century brought a hyperdrive that wouldn't engage. Jack fixed it in an afternoon, using techniques that wouldn't be invented for decades. A colony ship from the 30th century needed their temporal beacon repaired. Jack had the parts ready before they even asked, having ordered them from a supplier who existed 200 years in the future. Each repair strengthened the garage's position as a temporal nexus. Each satisfied customer spread the word about the incredible mechanic, who worked in Bay 94C, and each day that passed brought Jack closer to the moment when his plan would be tested. That moment came on a quiet morning when Jack was working on a particularly complex repair. The ship's temporal sensors detected an unusual energy signature near the station. Someone new had arrived, someone whose timeline was about to intersect with the garage in a significant way. Jack activated the external cameras and watched as a young woman made her way through Kepler Station's corridors. She moved with the precise gait of military training, but her clothes were civilian and worn. Her face had the hollow look of someone who had lost everything that mattered to them. She stopped in front of the job board near the docking bay, studying the listings with growing desperation. Jack had been watching the board too, and he knew exactly which posting would catch her attention. He had placed it there himself 3 days ago. Garage assistant position available, Bay 94C, must have mechanical experience. Housing provided. Apply in person. The woman, who Jack later learned was named Riley, stared at the posting for a long moment before making her decision. Jack watched her navigate the station's corridors, following the same path he had taken months or years ago. When she reached Bay 94C, she hesitated only briefly before pressing the call button. "Come in," Jack said over the intercom. The doors unlocked. Riley stepped into the garage and stopped short, just as Jack had done. The alien technology, the impossible machines, the silver ship in the center of it all. But this time, the mechanic who greeted her wasn't confused or desperate. Jack had been preparing for this moment since the day he accepted the job. "Welcome to Bay 94C, Jack said, stepping out from behind a workbench. "I'm Jack Sullivan, and I think you're exactly who I've been waiting for." Riley's eyes darted around the garage, taking in details that shouldn't exist. "What is this place?" "The most important job in the galaxy," Jack replied honestly, "but also the most demanding. Before we go any further, I need to know something about you. What brought you here? What are you running from?" Riley's military bearings slipped slightly. "I was discharged from the Terran fleet 6 months ago. Medical reasons. I've been looking for work ever since, but nobody wants to hire someone with my condition." Jack had read her file. Riley had been exposed to temporal radiation during a classified mission, leaving her partially unstuck in time. Most employers saw it as a liability. Jack saw it as perfect qualification for working in a temporal garage. "Your condition isn't a problem here," Jack said gently. "In fact, it might be exactly what we need. But I have to be completely honest with you about what this job involves." Over the next several hours, Jack explained everything. The ship's true purpose, the temporal mechanics of the garage, the war that needed to be prevented. He showed her Zek's recordings, Vale's visits, and most importantly, the solution that could free them both from the trap that had claimed so many mechanics before them. "Two people sharing the responsibility," Jack explained. "One maintaining the temporal field while the other lives in normal time. We switch every 6 months, taking turns carrying the burden. Either of us gets trapped, but the garage remains stable." Riley listened without interruption, asking technical questions. That showed she understood the implications. When Jack finished, she was quiet for a long time. "And you trust me with this?" she finally asked. "We barely know each other." Jack smiled. "I trusted the garage to bring me the right person. It brought me you. Besides, we have time to get to know each other. Lots of time." Riley walked over to the silver ship and placed her hand on its hull, just as Jack had done. The temporal energy flowed through her, and Jack saw her eyes widen as she felt the flow of time around them. It's beautiful, she whispered. Terrifying, but beautiful. So what do you say? Jack asked. Ready to help save the galaxy? Riley turned to face him, and Jack saw determination replace the hollow look in her eyes. When do we start? The garage hummed with approval as the two mechanics began their work together. For the first time in centuries, the burden would be shared. The timeline would remain stable, the war would be prevented, and two people would find purpose without losing their humanity. Jack taught Riley everything he had learned, and she brought her own expertise to the job. Together, they developed new repair techniques, proved the garage's efficiency, and even began working on modifications that might eventually allow the ship to return to its proper timeline without destroying the garage. The work orders kept coming from across the galaxy and across time, but now there were two mechanics to handle them. It's people to share the incredible responsibility of maintaining the flow of time itself. And in the quiet moments between repairs, Jack and Riley became friends, then partners, then something like family. They had found not just purpose, but belonging. The repair order for the temporal displacement drive remained active, its completion date still showing next millennium. But now it included an important update: status, ongoing, mechanics, 2, timeline, stable, customer satisfaction, guaranteed across all possible futures. Outside the garage, Kepler's station continued its slow orbit around a dying star, unaware that its most unremarkable bay contained the anchor point for galactic peace itself. And in Bay 94C, two mechanics worked together to ensure that the future would be worth protecting. The cycle was finally broken. The trap had become a partnership. And the garage that existed between moments had found its eternal guardians.